Peter Rosenberger, host of America's #1 syndicated radio show for caregivers. Peter shares a story of hope, love, encouragement, pain, grief, fear, and faith with Esther Luttrell.
Well, before I turn to Peter, I want to tell people about Peter, because there may be somebody who's been in a cave for the last 30 years and doesn't know who this wonderful man is. He is the nation's #1 first ever syndicated radio program. It's the first one. Didn't you say, Peter, that you had the first one ever dedicated to caregivers?
From what I understand, I do, and still have a pretty large national platform for the family caregiver.
You're a graduate of Belmont University in Nashville, master's in music. And if you don't agree with his taste in songs, I don't think I'd argue with him too much, because he has a black belt in martial arts. He is handsome. He's articulate. He plays a mean piano. He tells great jokes. And he has so much patience that Job would want to take notes. But let me tell you an inside story that he shares with the entire world. In 1984, there was a pretty college freshman. Her name was Gracie. And she fell asleep at the wheel of her car, and she was going 70 miles an hour. And she hit a concrete embankment, and she lived. 2 years later, as I understand it, she met and married the fellow I'm about to have you listen to. Neither of them had any idea that she would eventually have to give up both legs. And so began a journey that neither of them could have in their wildest imagination have anticipated. Peter is the author of Hope for the Caregiver, and he serves as president of Standing with Hope. It's a nonprofit organization. I think it was created by Gracie. USA Today says of this remarkable fellow, Peter Rosenberger offers a lifeline of hope to caregivers. So, Peter, what would you like said in an introduction that's never been said?
He tries. Bless his heart, he tries. And, your introduction was over the top. Those are very glowing words, and I thank you for them. I didn't get a master's in music. I have a bachelor's degree in music.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. I have a PhD in caregiving from the School of Hard Knocks.
You're the dean of that university, honey.
Well, I've learned a few things along this journey. I've been Gracie's caregiver now since 1986. When we got married, I said I do, and then I did. And it's been a journey fraught with many dangers, toils, and snares. And I've learned everything that I've learned the hard way.
Most of us have, haven't we?
One of the reasons I do the show and do all the things that I do is to help steer caregivers away from what I call the consolation of speculation. And that's when people, very much like Job's friends, came and tried to speculate on why God was doing what he was doing. Mm-hmm. Job 2:13 is one of my favorite verses in the Bible, where it says they sat there quietly for 7 days. We don't know a lot of people who could sit quietly for 7 minutes.
Isn't that true?
And sometimes I think it's important for us, when we see people going through brutal realities, to not try to speak into it. Just be there. Just be. Mm-hmm. Just be. And that was, a lot of people would come up to us over the years, and they would try to put out these platitudes and so forth, but God doesn't give you more than you can handle, and all that kind of stuff. And I categorically reject all those things, because I don't think they're rooted in anything but sentiment. People often ask me, well, what would Jesus do as a caregiver? I don't know what he would do. I don't try to speculate on that. I know what he did do. He delegated. He delegated care of his mother to John. So from the cross. So I figured, if he could delegate, so can I. If he can ask for help, so can I.
I'm sorry. Pardon me.
No, it's okay. I was the recipient of a lot of people's speculation, a lot of people's sentiment, greeting card type of platitudes.
Yeah.
And I know the heart of a caregiver is an exceedingly troubled place. And so I determined that I was going to speak with clarity and conciseness to these hearts in a way that caregivers could understand. I speak fluent caregiver. And so I thought, well, what would I want people to say to me as a young man? What would I say to that young man who married this woman with a broken body? And that's what I purpose to do with my books and my show and everything else, is to speak into these lives that are just fractured, dismayed, despairing, resentful, all the things that go on, fearful, all the things that are going on with the family caregiver, and help point them to safety so that they can be a little calmer, be a little healthier, and dare I say it, a little more joyful.
What I almost rudely interrupted with was the question, what do you say to someone in your position? Let's say that I just came to your house. I'm with somebody who knows you and I've come up with them. And now I don't even know what to say because everything that comes to mind is a platitude. Everything that comes to mind is something I read maybe in a Hallmark card or somewhere. And I'm trying to think, what do I genuinely think? If I rip away everything I've read, everything I'm supposed to say, what are you left saying? And the answer is not much.
Well, if you don't know what to say, you don't have to say anything. Your presence, he said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for what? Thou keeps talking to me? No, thou art with me. Just be with somebody. And one of the things I do for every caller into my show, I simply ask, how are you feeling?
I know you do.
When I ask them how they're feeling, it gives them a chance to respond in their own voice. There is no wrong or right answer after that. Well, it's not a wrong or right answer type of question. It's an act. How do you feel? And all too many caregivers start off talking about how their loved one feels.
Uh-huh.
And I usually stop them pretty quickly into it and say, let's back up. How are you feeling? Now, I've also had people that are used to speaking a little bit more casually about how they feel, just as a way of a stock answer. So I'll say, how are you feeling? Well, I'm just blessed, but I hate my mama, that kind of thing. And I'm like,
yes,
let's back up here.
Mm-hmm.
These are two different conflicting answers here you just gave. How do you really feel? And then once we establish how this person is really feeling in that moment, and not that our spiritual well-being or all these things are contingent on our feelings, the exercise I'm trying to do is help them learn to speak in their own voice. So I want to hear something that comes in first person singular. I am angry. I am hacked off. I am despairing. I am just so mad. Whatever. I don't care what comes after the word I. Now we can have a real conversation.
And Peter, what you're really doing is giving them permission to feel and to express those feelings, right?
Without having to frame them in their loved one's story. Okay. And that's really important because we caregivers get lost in someone else's story. And so you'll notice this with people. You'll say, well, how are you doing? And the first thing I say, well, we had a bad night, or she's not doing well, or our situation is this. And I'm trying to back up. Let's speak in first person singular, because one of the three I's, I call them the three I's, that every caregiver deals with, is we lose our independence, we become isolated, and then we lose our identity. I spent a lot of time in that place with caregivers, helping them learn to speak from their own voice. I had to go through the same process myself, and I did it so much that I ended up having a radio show. But I knew the importance of speaking from your own heart. And that's why I do particular things, like on my CD that I did, I wanted to play a hymn, and I did it. It's a bunch of hymns on it. It's called Songs for the Caregiver. One of them is Jesus Loves Me, because Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. And I know he knows Gracie. I know he loves Gracie. Do I know that he loves me too? And we caregivers get lost like this. And so I just decided, no, I'm going to address this caregiver, and I don't get off message with that, because the caregiver's story is all that I'm drilling down on. And then they have accepted certain platitudes, like you said, as, well, God obviously has a purpose, or you wouldn't be here. Well, thank you, Captain Obvious. Duh. I mean, how comforting is that? I've learned how to speak caregiver, and I want to teach this to my fellow caregivers, how to identify what help is, and then hopefully have the courage to ask for help. But I also want to speak to pastors and counselors and doctors and family and friend, and give them the vocabulary of a family caregiver, so they do know what to say or what not to say. And sometimes knowing what not to say is more important than knowing what to say.
Going way back to when we first started this, and talking about you meeting Gracie and then marrying her, she'd already had her accident.
Right.
Was there any clue, anything foreboding that said you were about to face, and certainly you wouldn't know the degree, But did you know something was coming?
They're looking back at it, I can see them now, but at the time we were young, way too young. I was incredibly naive, dumber than a box of hammers, and just smitten with how beautiful.
Oh, she is. She's so pretty.
She's I mean, don't take my word for it. Google her. I Googled her.
I did
back then, but we didn't even have Google then. So, I'm still Googling her, but and she was just drop dead gorgeous. And when she opened her mouth to sing, it was all over for me at that point. Yeah. But I had no clue. I had no clue what it was like to be in a relationship with somebody who suffers.
Not a relationship, but did you know that the medical process was not over? Was it ongoing at that point?
No, I knew that she would probably have. Well, she had surgery 3 months before we got married. I knew that she would have challenges, but I didn't understand orthopedically how badly she was hurt. That didn't come about until a couple of years later, and it was a pretty rough moment for me and for her, and it took me down a dark path that. It was at least a dozen years before I was able to kind of come out of that. And then even still, I think I fight against that. There's that. I think I'm going to fight probably against that for the rest of my life. When you see someone you love suffer, it is, and it doesn't end. It doesn't stop. I mean, it's relentless. Every day she's in pain. Every day she's struggling. Every day there's something we got to deal with. It's not a one and done thing with us in our life. And, people call me up sometimes on the show and ask for advice on what to do after their loved one has passed away and they're no longer a caregiver. I'm like, how should I know?
This just recently, someone called me, a friend, and her little granddaughter had just died. Now, what do you say to her grandmother, who's only like 46 or 47 years old?
I think what I would do is I would probably play for her, and I'd probably play a song for her, and I would probably, it's one of the ones on my record. That's why I put it there. I would probably play this song. There is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God, a place where sin cannot molest. Near to the heart of God. Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us who wait before thee near to the heart of God. There is a place of full release near to the heart of God, a place where all is joy and peace near to the heart of God. And I would play that for her, and I would probably put my hand over my mouth and not say anything else. And that's what I would say to her.
That is
gorgeous, gorgeous. Thank you.
That's all I have to offer. And I play. People ask me about my music. I mean, and I've grown up playing all kinds of different things, but I play like a guy who's watched a woman suffer for 35 years, and so I'm not in a hurry to get out there and just beat the crap out of a song and show you what I can do as a pianist. I'm more focused on how can I speak to your troubled heart? How can I communicate to you these great principles of faith and hope and endurance, and fortitude in a way that's going to make sense to you in the midst of your anguish.
Peter, is there anybody else out there doing what you do?
You know what? I'm sure there is, because that's what our Savior does. And he's pretty good at cultivating that in other people too.
He certainly chose a great messenger in you.
You're very kind on that, but I really want my message more than the messenger, because I know what I am, Esther. I'm a broken, flawed man who has failed on every kind of level that you can fail at. I have forgotten more failures than most people will, but I wanted people to understand, and I'm willing to go out there and say that because I want people to understand just how great the redemption of God is and just what our God does with this kinds of stuff. And he reaches into the most horrific of circumstances. And, the old Bill Gaither tune, something beautiful, something good. All my confusion, he understood. All I had to offer him was brokenness and strife. That is a true statement. All I had. And so, yes, I'm heavily evangelical about this, but I don't care. Take care of somebody who suffers for 35 years and do it as an atheist and get back to me and see how that works for you. I'm not all that worked up about trying to be politically correct because who want to somehow push back against my faith on these things, they haven't done what I do. And there is nothing else to run to. I know, I've tried. Yeah. And so when you see these things like your friend and this grandmother, this young grandmother, and her heart is forever traumatized.
Oh, yeah.
This young mother, her heart is forever traumatized. And we don't understand these things and how God can allow such horrific things. We just don't get it. We want him to fix it. We want him to repair it. We want to redo. Mm-hmm. We want him to throw a flag on the play. And he's intervening in a much different way than we could possibly understand. And, that is my story. He intervened in me and took something that was broken and with Gracie and I both, and he's invited us to trust him in this. And I don't like it. I don't understand it. People say, well, look at the great testimony you have. Who cares?
Yeah,
I don't want this kind of great testimony.
You're right.
Billy Graham had a pretty good run and had kept both of his legs all the way to the end, and so I'm not that noble. And then people say, well, what did people have asked this of Gracie? Well, what did you do that God would do this to you? And so one of the reasons I do my show is to help correct that particular problem.
Mm-hmm. Though, I do believe strongly that everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. And the only difference between a winner and a loser in life is how you live your story.
Well, we do. But if we put these demands that somehow this has got to be in place for us to be able to be, I'll give you an example, Esther. I was talking with, and I shared this on my show yesterday, and I've got a new book I'm working on, and I was with my my agent, and he sent several publishers we're talking to. One of them in particular, we're still waiting on back, but this is one that came back and they said, well, it wasn't the right fit for where they were going with their fall catalog or whatever they're doing. And then she added on, we were a little bit off put by his humor. And I laughed at that because that is a perfect example of somebody who has never done what I do. Mm-hmm. And they're looking at it from the outside saying, oh, those poor people, we need to feel sorry for them.
Yes.
And I'm like, if you ever met Gracie, you would grieve over her loss, but you would never feel sorry for Gracie. What am I supposed to do? Wait for Gracie to get better or worse before I can have joy and live life and laugh and cut up and appreciate beauty and all that kind of stuff? No, this is our life, but it's not a bad life.
As horrible as what she goes through, as horrible as what you go through, it is not your entire life. There are other pockets of your life. And in those pockets, you eat good food and you laugh and you talk about other things.
I'm going to get out on a snowmobile after this conversation with you and go feed horses in the snow in Montana. That's not a bad thing to do on a snowy afternoon in Montana. Now, granted,
no, it's not.
Here it is. It's April and it's springtime everywhere else, but in Montana, spring is more of an illusion. And I've come to that's one of the reasons we moved out here, because the cold climate is much easier on her arthritis. And but I was sitting in traffic in Nashville. I mean, just bumper to bumper, 2 miles from my home, trying to get to my home.
Oh yeah.
And I've been living there in that same house for 28 years. We've been in Nashville since the early 80s, and it was 9,000 degrees and 200% humidity. And I thought, why are we doing this? And so I came out here to get away from some of the things. We live 10 miles from the paved road, and we don't even have a traffic light in our county. The only traffic I have to deal with is cattle. So I've learned to slow my heart down a little bit, my soul down.
Yeah.
And look, I go out sometimes and I look at a sky that is filled with stars that are so close that I almost could touch them. And I get up in the morning and I see sunrises that'll break your heart. And I've decided that for whatever season in my life that where we are, and that God has allowed me the opportunity to slow down. I was running at 100 miles an hour in Nashville, just doctor after doctor after doctor, getting my pharmacy, the frenetic pace of a caregiver. And I've done it for 3.5 decades. And
are you close to a hospital where you are?
Well, the local community hospital where we have good primary care is 17 miles away. That's not too bad. The specialist she has to go to is 200 miles away, 220 miles away. But the speed limits in Montana are more of suggestions anyway. So you do the math. No, but we were there in Nashville at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, some of the finest doctors in the world there. Mm-hmm. But we also came to the point where we needed something more than just the finest medical providers in the world. We needed something that was, because you can only cut on Gracie so much, and she's facing possibly another very, very serious surgery.
And that's like 80?
Yeah, she's had at least 80 that I can count.
Oh, Lord.
And 150 other smaller procedures.
Oh, bless her.
This one will be one of her biggest to date, if not her biggest, with her back. Yeah. We're trying to, wrap our minds around that. But we're also trying not to live in the wreckage of our future. And this is something that a lot of caregivers do. We live with an enormous amount of fear. We plan for the future, but we don't have to live in abject terror of it.
Well, it's like you told in that story about she was going to have bandages changed or something drained every so often, and it was going to go on for 3 months. And you said, I can't do it. And then your wonderful surgeon put his hand on your shoulder and he said, you don't have to do it for 3 months. We're going to do it for 24 hours.
And that's exactly it. So I understand how that fear grips a caregiver. I do.
Of course, sure.
And I want to be able to speak to that with clarity in a way that caregivers can really understand, because they're going to accept something from me that they wouldn't necessarily accept from someone else. When I go to Africa with our prosthetic limb work, and I'm in the airport or around in the markets or so forth, and if I hear somebody speaking English with an American accent, particularly with a Southern accent, my ear automatically picks it out. Sure. I'm drawn to it. They speak my language. Well, that's what I want to do for fellow caregivers. I want them to hear somebody speak in a way that they can understand. People didn't do that to me. I had to translate so much of what was coming at me in a way that, and I didn't understand it. And then what little I did glean from it, it was like me speaking in broken English kind of thing. And but over time, and a lot of help, a longer journey that we got time for today, I was able to grasp these things in a substantive, meaningful way to me. And all I'm doing is turning around and offering that to my fellow caregivers. In Corinthians, Paul says, you comfort one another with the same comfort you yourself have been comforted by the God of all comfort. So that's all I'm doing, is passing on what has been shared with me, but I've aggregated it over a lifetime. And I think that some of these things take a lifetime to work through, Esther. I mean, it's not like you can just figure this thing out in one day and I got it. Okay, let me go run with it. And I think we've seen this played out on a lot of high profile stages where people who have had a traumatic event in their life, and then they go out and they're on stage under the bright lights before that thing has really had a chance to season with them.
Oh, absolutely. I'm guilty of that myself. When my son died, it took me 13 years to gather the courage to write a book about the fact that he literally did appear to me after he died. And he said to me, and he was just as three-dimensional as you, life and love are eternal, Mom. Go out and tell them. And I didn't have the courage because I didn't want to be called a liar. I didn't want him to be called a liar. I didn't want to say, you're lying, you're making that up. 13 years to gather the courage to write Dear Dean Loved Mom.
I think once you own your message and what you're about, and then, it doesn't matter what people say.
That's true. But I did do what you said. I got on the stage before I was still, when you go on a stage, as you know, you've got to be totally confident in what you're saying. I went on the stage still a little apologetic in my heart. I know you won't believe this, but here's what happened. And that's not the way you convince anybody. And I did it totally wrong.
Well, and I've been on stages since I was 5 with music. But I didn't start speaking about this with caregivers until I've been doing it for about 25 years. But I found that when I went out there, if I stayed in my little square, there was nothing under me but bedrock.
Yes.
And that's why I don't have to worry about getting into an argument with people or anything else. I don't care what they have to say.
Oh,
My
absolutely.
experience trumps their opinion. I'm sharing what I learned through a lot of experience, a vast amount of experience. And these are principles that continue to still sustain me.
Did you make up FOG, or is that something that you had read and you expound on?
I made it up.
Tell us about that, because right.
Fear, obligation, and guilt. We live there. What do you do when you get to a fog? You slow down.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do when we're in a fog of caregivers: fear, obligation, and guilt. And here's how you know when you're dealing with obligation. For example, I have to, I must, I should, I need to, I'm supposed to, I should. We should all over ourselves. That's what I tell my fellow caregivers. We live in that sense of obligation. Yeah. Or when I want to watch a television without interruption, or when I just want to sit down and read a book without interruption. That fear, obligation, and guilt. And the guilt can be over a lot of different things, but it doesn't have to be over big time sins that get great press. It can be over the fact that you brought this child into the world that has special needs.
Peter, sometimes, sorry, I'm just jumping real quick. Sometimes the guilt factor is something that's very, very small, and it manifests itself in weird ways. For example, when we were caring for our older daughter, who we lost in 2010, it was about a 6-year illness. And I remembered when our HR person at work announced that they were ready to change medical plans because of a couple of really big claims against, it was a small company. And I knew that, oh my gosh, that was from me. That was from my daughter. That was from the bone marrow transplant we went through. And I just broke in tears speaking to our HR rep because I was apologizing that I tanked our medical plan. And so such a silly thing to feel guilty about, but it comes out of you, out of that guilt.
I think there are, and I think that we want people to like us. We're afraid of being castigated in the court of public opinion. There's all kinds of things, but it will play out all kinds of, I heard a great quote the other day. There are many terrible things I experienced in my life. Most of them didn't happen.
Yes, isn't that true? Listen, I do want people to know about your radio show. It's called Hope for the Caregiver. And I hear it on Saturday mornings on KBUZ coming out of America Family Radio. What do you have to say about it? How would you invite them to listen? If they want to talk to you and they want to call in, they call when? Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern. 888-589-8840. Really good. Okay. But the podcast is available and it's free. You can go out there, hopeforthecaregiver.com, and we podcast not only the show, but we also do a separate interview podcast where I interview folks and bring on people. We flesh out a lot of different conversation topics. I heard you first on Kathy Lee Gifford, but then the one that prompted me to run down to my computer and contact you was you and Jeff Foxworthy, because you all were having so much fun, and yet you really talked about things of substance. And I just loved you. I said, God, this is in your hands. They probably won't answer me, but I leave it totally up to you. And I would be ashamed not to answer you, Esther. You were very gracious to reach out, but if anybody wants to have any type of meaningful conversation about this topic, like I said, this is not work for me. This is who I'm called to be. This is what I do, and so I'm eager to do it. It's not a big deal for me to run my mouth. As long as I don't have to travel too much, because I'm a long ways from everything. Yes. Well, you're not far from your horses, and I'm going to let you get to them in just a moment. I listened to 3 of your podcasts this morning. I listened to them back to back. They were all wonderful. And all I did was go to your website. It's just easy. I just typed in hopeforthecaregiver.com, and you come up on Google. Just click on the first one. You're going to come up on your beautiful website. You're going to be able to listen to all of those 5 podcasts. And like ours, yours are free. And I think that's a wonderful service to everyone. Well, I'm interested in equipping and strengthening and fortifying my fellow caregivers. There's 65 million of us out there and counting. And that number, I think, is growing. I do something different that a lot of people don't do. And I want to also make sure I get this into your audience.
one of the things that I do differently than any other caregiver outreach out there is that I include people who are in relationship with alcoholics and addicts as
Yes,
family
I
caregivers.
heard you mention that on some of your podcasts.
And the reason I do that is because alcoholism and addiction is a chronic impairment.
Mhm.
You're going to fight against this, for the rest of your life if you're an addict or an alcoholic. Now, you may be in recovery and not take a drop of alcohol and not take a drug for the rest of your life, but you will still fight it. And there is a residual impact. And those who are in a relationship with you function as caregivers. They may not see it as such. And I've introduced that concept. And once I did that, it really opened the floodgates. I had more people reaching out to me to say, to express gratitude that they were hearing truth in a way they could understand it in dealing with their loved one. They never thought of it this way before.
I know.
You're looking at a vast number of people out there that are in relationship with chronically impaired people. So that's one of the focuses. The big focus I put on the show. And, a lot of people, when they think of caregivers, they think of nursing homes. They think of taking care of the elderly. And that's certainly a part of it. But I've been a caregiver since I was 22. And Gracie has never been in a nursing home and not planning on going. My brother has a daughter who is 33 with cerebral palsy and severe developmental issues.
Oh, dear.
And they've been caregivers for her entire life. So, this is not about the elderly. This is about the caregiver, the person who is pushing the wheelchair, who is staying up late at night, back and forth to doctor's office, back and forth to hospitals, back and forth to rehab centers, on the phone with the pharmaceutical companies, trying to hold down a job, cleaning up messes, doing laundry, cooking dinner. I spend more time doing laundry and cooking and cleaning, I think, than anything else. So the journey of a caregiver is not one that we just sit there and just go to the nursing home. That's not what I'm talking about. And a lot of people think, well, they want to call it, well, how do I care give? They wanted me to talk to them about their caregiving task. And I don't really get into that much because I can't tell you how to take care of your loved one any more than you tell me how to take care of mine. What I can tell you is here are the really bad quagmires. I'm as I tell people often, I'm not a there kind of guy. I'm a, hey, don't go down there. That's a bad place. I've been down there. I'm the Wile E. Coyote of caregivers. And
this
I've done that.
This business right now of people being isolated, it must be terribly hard on caregivers. Must be terribly hard.
The world is understanding what the caregivers have always understood, and that's isolation. The world is getting a firsthand view of some of the heartache that goes into a caregiver because you're so isolated. Caregivers can feel isolated in a crowded room. Caregivers can feel isolated on a crowded pew. And I had somebody, I was doing an interview somewhere. I don't remember where, but the conversation came up, and this person had no frame of reference of this journey. They were just interviewing me or whatever, and I said, "Have you ever had the flu?" And this is long before Corona, because everybody says flu now and they freak out. But you ever had the flu? She says, yes. Okay. How long were you sick? 3 or 4 days. I said, what happened to the laundry while you were sick? Well, it piled up. What about meals? Well, we did a lot of takeout. It just kind of was whatever we throw together. How about the cleaning of the house? It got pretty rough. How about your workplace? Did you go to work? Did you call in sick? Whatever. Yeah, but I did some, but I couldn't go in, and I got behind a lot of things. What about your bills? Did you stay on top of that? Well, I pushed them off until I started feeling better. How about your love life, your relationship? Well, everything went on hold. I said, that was your life for 3 or 4 days. I'm in my 125th hour of that. I've been doing this now. I actually counted up the days, 10,000, let's see, almost 11,000 days that I've been doing this. And I said, your whole world, I said to this person, your whole world was turned upside down with a 4-day flu. And I'm in 11,000 days of that. You cannot wait to live life, live a life of meaning and of substance and of beauty and of joy and of honest approach to life. You cannot put that on hold for 11,000 days. Exactly. If you are a caregiver, I am passionately here for you. I'm a caregiver sheepdog. And I want you to know that there is a path to safety where you can catch your breath. You can take a knee. You can develop healthier strategies to live a calmer and healthier life. Healthy caregivers make better caregivers. Several years ago, we launched a secondary program, which is the caregiver outreach. And we realized that those who are pushing the wheelchair need to be able to get stronger, to healthier. They got to be able to live.
Yeah.
And who's going to tell them if I don't? And that's the way I looked at it, because I was looking at the stuff that was out there, and I thought, that doesn't, a lot of people that were saying things, and I looked at them, I was like, really? That's what you're offering? And so I decided I'll just jump into it myself and start speaking from my own journey. I don't know that I'm that wonderful. I've just had more opportunity to fail than most people. And failure is a very good teacher. And when you're the crash test dummy of caregivers, it does provide you with a little bit more opportunity to learn some hard lessons. But this is what we do. And Gracie and I are committed to this, and we feel very passionate about it. And all we're doing is extending what others have extended to us. She knows the value of quality prosthetics. We want to do the best we can to help others experience that same thing. I know the value of people speaking in a coherent, concise way to my agony, and I want to do the same for others.
I would suspect not as many people can offer to you what you're able to offer to other people, though. And for that, I apologize for all of us that we just don't have these words for you, and I wish we did.
No, you're fine. You've done fine. And I do have people that have been doing that for me. I've got a core group of men around me that speak very frankly to me. They haven't gone through a fraction of what I've gone through, but they've gone through their own journey, and they're why I've deliberately sought them out. Wise men and some dear friends who look after me and are not afraid to get up in my business and say, hey, you're full of crap. I don't take me seriously. I take the message seriously.
Absolutely.
And I take the time with you seriously. This is important. You have honored me by letting me be on your first show, and I want it to be successful for you, and have a great time with it, and go out and touch and lift up a lot of lives. I know you will. You're obviously very passionate, and thank you for the privilege of just hanging out with you.
Thank you, darling.
I'll leave you with this. My goal is to help my fellow caregivers when they're standing in a grave. First off, I want us to be the ones standing, because we don't want to leave our loved one without a caregiver. And so that means we got to be good stewards of ourselves. But when we do stand at a grave, that we stand there without clenched fist. Our loved one, ourselves, friends and family who didn't help maybe the way we want them to, and we cry. We're going to cry, but are they going to be tears of despair and rage? Or are they going to be tears of mourning? Because Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And that's my message to my fellow caregivers. It's okay to mourn. And it's also okay to laugh. And it's okay to live life in the midst of such sorrow. We look at painful things in our life. And I'm not here to distract from that. I'm just simply saying there's more to it than just being myopic and looking at the pain. There is beauty even in these harsh times. Some of the most meaningful times Gracie and I have ever had have been in a hospital room. And so I offer that to my fellow caregivers as somebody who's been there and is still there and doesn't have any plans to go away anytime soon from there. There is beauty there.
You're remarkable, because there are people who have walked away who just couldn't do it, and you've done it. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you share, and God bless you. I know that's a cliche, but I really, really mean it. I hope you
I know you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Love
you, Esther.
Peter.
Thank you, Patrick.
And I
Peter,
look forward to talking
pleasure.
to Gracie one day.
Oh, you better get a lot of tape for that talk.
I know.
Girl's a member
darling.
of a 12-step class for talkers called On and On and On and On. And on.
I'm the president. All right. Goodbye, darling. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is Jeff Evans. Patrick McGranahan was your executive in charge of production. Esther Luttrell was host and producer.